Okay,
Okay.
so welcome everybody to the official rehearsal of José María Gil's presentation. Yeah,
Okay. Thank you so much. Shall I start with this? Okay.
yes.
Thank you so much, Paul, for this invitation. Thank
I mean, I
you.
won't introduce you any more than that since it's a rehearsal.
It's okay. It's okay. I mean, maybe I the presentation will be made by means of the examples and the development of the subject we are going to consider, if you want.
Oh,
This
here
is
we have JP Sank. Welcome.
okay.
Okay. Can you hear us, JP? Okay, I hope so.
Okay, good. Is my mic open now? I'm
Yeah.
struggling. Mic
Yeah,
open. Hello.
great. So just a brief explanation, JP. We just realized it's Thanksgiving in the US. So that's why probably there are very few people. And Jose agreed here to run like a short official rehearsal for his presentation that we will actually reschedule.
Oh, okay.
But since we're
Well,
here,
I admit I was distracted by Thanksgiving myself. If I can get my camera on, watching the parades with my wife. So I'm like,
yeah,
oh no,
so
have a talk. Oh,
yeah, that's my fault. I didn't think about that, didn't consider
yeah.
that. Well,
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 with Jose
anyways, since
Maria
we're
Gill, this
here,
topic you can do it anytime. Do it on Christmas. I'll be there.
Yeah.
great, great,
That's
thanks.
that was the day we are going to that we were suggesting before Christmas Day
Yeah,
for
for rescheduling it. So,
for
Jose,
scheduling
no
a
more
meeting.
interruptions from my side.
That doesn't matter. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Paul. Thank you all the people of the Center of Comparative and Cognitive Linguistics. I would like to make a shorter presentation of this of this work that could be entitled "A Relational Account of Communication on the Basis of Anomalous Cases." Since this is a shorter presentation, I will make reference to my hometown later. I'm from Argentina. I worked some. I have worked with CELINE thanks to a Fulbright scholarship in 2009 and 2010. He also visited Argentina in 2011. Here you have him in on the Atlantic Ocean, and when he presented the Spanish version of his book Pathways of the Brain,
Jose, can
which
you
was
make it bigger or make it in presentation mode?
sorry,
Thank you.
which was yes, this
There we
is
go.
the
Great.
Spanish presentation, the Spanish version of his book Pathways of the Brain, and here you have said in Mar del Plata. He also visited Buenos Aires and Mendoza. Gisela was her host
Yes.
there.
Yes, I do.
Well, this is Rice University, and he has said playing with my son Julian, who was very young at that moment. And well, here you have a roadmap of the presentation that I was going to develop first, but maybe today we can just consider some general examples and the fundamentals of relational network theory and the way that relational network theory can account for what we may call anomalous or rare or weird cases. The great parts of these presentations are: number one, the relational account of language structure and language use. Then I was going to consider some aspects of neurological plausibility of relational networks, although it is not the main theme of this presentation, but of course is one of the great assets of Sidney Lamb's theory. And points 3 and 4 maybe are the main contribution that this presentation could provide, that have to do with a relational account of slips of the tongue and a relational account of some anomalous and creative cases. In fact, Sidney Lamb wrote at the very beginning of his book, Pathways of the Brain, the sequence that is written there. He says that also most current linguistics fails to consider various kinds of anomalous data, which actually reveal very important information about the structure of the mental system which underlies our linguistic abilities, including slips of the tongue and unintentional puns. So slips of the tongue and intentional puns are generally considered as weird, anomalous cases that, and they are simply not considered but mainstream linguistics. Relational network theory. Of course, I didn't mention that, but we are just a very, since I'm trying to develop a shorter presentation of this proposal, I didn't say that if you have any question or any comment, you simply can talk whenever you consider it appropriate. If there is some silence, a gap, since I have the slide presentation as a whole, I cannot check the chat or see your faces, but of course you can ask a question or provide some comment or simply talk about anything when you consider it appropriate. Of course, that the relational account of language is not absolutely new. Considering Sidney Lamb's theory, we have an important tradition in linguistics that can be considered relational. The first of all is the Ferdinand de Saussure, whose concept of value is strongly relational. According to Saussure, the elements, the components of the linguistic system are defined in terms of the other elements. Every element is defined in negative terms. In relation with this, Louis Jenslow said that the recognition that a totality does not consist of things, but of relationships, and that not substance, but only its internal and external relationships have scientific existence. This assumption may be new in linguistic science, but the postulations of objects as something different from the terms of relationships is a superfluous axiom, and consequently a metaphysical hypothesis from which linguistic science will have to be freed. So this is a very important contribution made by Jenslow in terms of the development of relational theory, because he suggests that there are not discrete objects in the linguistic systems, but in any case, relationships, and the nodes resulting from that relationships are the real constituents of the linguistic system. Here, some key expressions are language as a network of relationships, relational linguistics, information in the connectivity, nodes and connections, and connections. Well, Lamb develops a notational system that enables us to identify and to represent clearly why the linguistic system is a network of relationships. This is an idea that has been maintained by Saussure, Jenslow, Halliday, but the first linguist that really develops a notational system that helps us to account for that fact is Sidney Lamb. And here we have a first relatively simple example, which is the representation of a node for cat. We have a triangle and something like a fork. The triangle represents information that connects the lexical node for cat with different elements corresponding to the phonological connections. I mean, the connection here we have a node for cat, and this node, which is integrated by the central line, the fork, and the triangle in the base, corresponds to the representation of lexical information. This lexical information is connected upwards to semantic or conceptual information. The word cat sends activation to different meanings, that is whip, domestic felon, man, no? And downwards, the lexical node for cat sends activation in an ordered word, first to the node corresponding to the phoneme that is represented by K, then to the phoneme that is represented by A, then to the phoneme that is represented by T. Here we have something that is very important, and it is the fact that labels, the labels that are written here, like cat, like the labels for phonological information, like the labels for conceptual information, are not part of the linguistic system. Lamps suggest that labels are like roads in highways. I'm sorry, that labels are like banners, or like banners in highways. The banner is not part of the highway itself, and the labels here are not part of the relational network. They help us to interpret the relational network. This figure shows us the different types of nodes in relational networks. They have been developed during the decade of 1960 under the influence of Michael Halliday. And this is a notational system that will help the theory to account for linguistic structure in terms that are completely different from the representation of symbols. For example, these different types of nodes are defined in terms of different relationships, which are downward and upward orientation, ordered or unordered, and or nodes. Downward and upward, as we saw before, are crucial. All of them are crucial, but downward and the relationship downward upward is crucial because this tension defines the correlation between meaning and expression. Downward means oriented to expression, to phonology. On the other hand, upward means makes reference to orientation to meaning. Like here in figure 1 that represents cat, we have the lexical level in the middle, and the lexical node establishes connection with upwards with meaning, and downwards with phonology. Then we have the tension or the opposition between ordered and unordered. For example, if we consider this slide number 15, on the upper right part of the slide, we have downward ordered and. Okay? This downward ordered and represents information that is activated in an ordered word, not simultaneously, like in figure 1. In this case, cat sends activation, the lexical node for cat sends, if cat has to be uttered by a single speaker, cat sends activation first to K, then to A, and then to T. This is an ordered AND node. First one element, then the other, then the other. It's different from, for example, downward unordered AND. We are going to consider some examples here. This could be the case of the representation of a phoneme like, for example, K in cat, which is plosive, vela, those features, plosive, vela, voiceless, are features that come all together. It's different from the activation in the case of the ordered AND. And the other opposition is, of course, absolutely relevant, is the opposition between OR and AND. OR is basically the type of relationship that could be explained in terms of paradigmatic relationships. Or, as its name suggests, means that it is necessary to activate at least one of the elements connected to the node. On the other hand, an AND node implies or involves the fact that all the elements of this node have to be activated. I think that in the next examples, all this information may become clearer. Another crucial fact regarding these nodes of relational networks is that all these nodes are bidirectional. Information goes from expression to meaning and from meaning to expression. This is important because there is another type of notational system in relational networks. So, the linguistic system is a network of relationships, and these relationships can be represented by means of concrete relational networks. We are going to consider some examples. I think that by this way it will be clear. For example, here we have a case of upward unordered AND. The node for the English word is connected simultaneously to all these meaning, to these three meanings, these three concepts involving morphological information. Is connects at the same time with present, be, third person singular. This node is an upward, another, or that can be very operative in order to explain cases like that. Here you have the case of a duck that comes to a bar and asks for a beer and finally says, "Put it on my bill." Okay, this is a duck walks into a bar and asks for a beer. The bartender serves it, and the duck says, "Put it on my bill." It's a pun, an intended pun, a joke in English. It's funny for English speakers, of course, and it can be explained on the basis of the ambiguity of the polysemy of the word bill, because bill connects both to big and account. So, and this is an upward, another, or. This is very interesting because in the case of a pun, we have that the two meanings are activated in the system of the hearer. it's not compulsory to activate these two meanings, but in the case of a pan, it is. So the upward and other on, or, sorry, is connected to the different meanings of a lexical node. Upward and other or accounts for polysemy, accounts for ambiguity, accounts for the fact that lexical nodes and corresponding words in linguistic production are connected to different meanings. Of course, if you have any question or comment, you are free to ask. I think, is it clear? Am I clear? Is my pronunciation clear? I come back.
I think everyone is clear. So
okay, I go on. If you have some question or complain, of course you can talk whenever you want. This example is here you have so the difference between upward and other and upward and other or. Upward and other and, it is necessary that all the lines departing from the node have to be activated because it is an and. Here, it is not necessary that all the lines have to. It's not necessary for all the lines to be activated. In this case, they are activated because it's helpful to explain the pan. But maybe in another context, if I say put it on my bill, people will understand account and not big because I'm not a duck, of course. But in the context of the joke, the two meanings are activated. Or, like in basic logics, means only one of the options or more. It's an inclusive or. On the other hand, and is an and, all the options. Okay, here we have a relatively more complex relational network that helps us to account for all these concepts that we have been considering. And we have different types of nodes that will be good to help us to understand maybe some of the fundamentals of relational network theory. For example, we have the lexical node for hard. This relational network is represents clearly what we may call polysemy, because the node for hard connects upward both to the meaning that can be represented as hard and difficult and to difficult. You see? If you consider the upper part of the relational network, and if you see difficult, which is, let's remember, we should always remember that the labels are not part of the relational network, but we need them because we need the symbol in order to identify what the relational network is representing. If we consider difficult, which is written in capital letters, we will see that it accounts for, it can be helpful to understand the relation of synonymy, because difficult, the node, the conceptual node for difficult is connected both to the lexical nodes difficult and hard. So synonymy can be interpreted in relational networks as a downward, an order on that connects a conceptual node with more than one lexical node. I think that I said that properly. Synonymy can be defined as a semantic conceptual node, semological node, that connects precisely some meaning with more than one lexical node.
May I cut in for a second here? I'm sorry. There's this little thing blocking part of the bottom of the diagram. It says like stop sharing. Next to it, it says hide. Maybe if you hit hide, that'll disappear and we can see the entire diagram.
Can you see the entire diagram?
Do you see the little bar that says stop sharing?
Oh, I saw it.
Hide, hide. There
okay.
we go. Now we can see the entire diagram.
Is it okay now?
Yes.
Much better.
Sorry. So we have that synonymy can be defined as the connection established by means of a downward, another, or between some meaning and more than one lexical node. On the other hand, polysemy can be defined as the relationship established by an upward, another, or between a lexical node and more than one meaning. We can say that meanings correspond to the realm of semantics, but in fact, Lamb makes reference to something that is more complex. He talks about semology, which could be the entire messy realm of all kinds of meanings, including subsystems of meanings that have connections with the lexicogrammatical system. But this is another beautiful fact of relational theory, and it is that all kinds of meanings that we conceive are part of semology, are meanings, in fact, that may have some connection with the linguistic system. And if they don't have a direct connection with the linguistic system, okay, they will have some mediated relationship with it. I think that later we will be able to consider some example. But coming back to this to this figure, we see that we have that relational networks are good to explain synonymy, and polysemy are good to explain the connection between lexical nodes and semantic nodes, and let's say between lexical nodes and meanings. And if we go downwards, we're going to see phonological information. In the case of heart, we have a downward ordered and, because heart sends activation first to the phoneme that is represented by the H, then to the phoneme that is represented by the A, then to the phoneme that is represented by the R, and finally by the phoneme that is represented by D. In the case of and this is why we have a downward ordered and. If you see, the ordered nodes present lines that have their origin in different points of the triangle or the fork. On the other hand, unordered nodes present lines that have their origin in the same point. What happens, for example, with the node for A, that is for the vowel that is represented by A? Okay, we have a node, as we have the node for heart, and there is an upward, unordered, or that has a connection with heart, and there are other lines whose connections are not represented, but they are like they are cuts. There is a short line that aims at representing that. Okay, this node, of course, is connected to all the morphemes or the morphemic or lexemic nodes that include this phoneme. And this is something very interesting because there is only one node for the vowel A in relational in the linguistic system, and there is only one node for heart in the linguistic system. If you see the phonological notes, for example, let's go on with the note for A. We have the fork that represented the upward another O, and we have a triangle that represents, in this case, a downward another and, different from had, where we had an and note, a downward and note, but an ordered downward order. Here we have another and note. And what happens here? Okay, the phoneme or the phonological note for A sends activation at the same time to the features vowel, back, low. So this example helps us to show that this very small, very brief part of the linguistic system, which is a relational network as a whole, is a part of this relational network. This is a particular relational network that helps us to represent the connections between lexical information, meanings, phonological information. Relational networks in this type of notation, which is abstract or compact notation, are bidirectional. And this is another beautiful fact of this theory, because it accounts for linguistic production and linguistic interpretation. Roughly, in linguistic production, we go from meanings to expression, that is to say, from meanings to phonology. On the other hand, in comprehension or linguistic interpretation, we go from phonology to meanings. And relational networks account for this fact, account for the fact that downward information represents information that goes from meanings to phonology. And on the other hand, it accounts for, relational networks account for the fact that linguistic interpretation goes from phonology to meanings. Okay, here we have an example in which relational networks may be useful to explain disambiguation. That is the case in which a concept is selected instead of another one. In this case, in the case of the pun, put it on my bill, the effect of the pun, the humorous effect of the pun, is based on the fact that the two meanings in this case have to be activated. But in many other cases, if we are talking about, for example, a bank account, nobody will. It will be very hard for an interpreter to activate the concept corresponding for big. So in this case, if we are talking about money, we are talking about some investment, the concept that will be selected will be account and not big, particularly because we are humans and we are not ducks. So relational networks may represent that case in these terms, and here we have that, for example, the circle that is in the base of the slide could be interpreted as the lexical node that sends information to the two meanings, for example, big and account, like here. The fact is that here we have the basic representation of narrow notation that maybe can be a subject of another presentation. But here we have the node that could be interpreted as a simple representation, like a circle. The node or the lexical node sends activation. For example, the node build, sense, activation, both to big and account. But as you see, the concept number 2, account, receives more activation from another concept or for information corresponding of the context of situation that, of course, is represented in the cognitive system of the speaker or of the hearer. So relational networks are able to account for the structure of the linguistic system, of the connection between meanings, lexicogrammatical information and phonology, polysemy, synonymy, the disambiguation, the correct interpretation, or the interpretation that is, I have a problem here, the information that is coherent according to the context of situation, and how disambiguation can be implemented.
If I may interrupt, José.
Yes, of course.
Okay, if you can go back to the slide with disambiguation.
Yeah.
There's the one that you just presented. Exactly. Okay. So you explained very well how this actually is an OR node in a more detailed notation, basically, right?
Yeah.
So it's actually in the, yeah. So this connects to a question I kind of always had about the OR nodes.
Yeah.
So my question is related to the ordered OR nodes. Now, I mean
okay.
that the narrow notation actually makes the abstract notation nodes more explicit and things like that. But my question is, do you think that this kind of notation for this particular node, the one that you have in this diagram, only makes very explicit the way that an OR node works? Or do you also think that it makes even obsolete the ordered OR node? Because as you very well explained, the selection between the two, or more, but in this example, between the two nodes here, concept 1 and concept 2, is actually a matter of additional activation coming from other parts of the cognitive system. So actually what happens is that the node on the base does not send activation to one or the other, actually sends to both of them, and then only one will get activated depending on the additional activation that it receives. That's okay. That's how we explain OR nodes in a more detailed notation. But my question is that, given this way of functioning of the OR nodes, is the difference between ordered and unordered OR nodes still valid, or is just a thing related to the way how the theory evolved? What do you think?
Oh, that's
in my opinion, that's
what
by default line, you know, because the ordered OR node has a line that we call by default. It would still get activated depending on the additional activation, wouldn't it?
Okay.
Or not?
Oh, I think.
What do you think?
I think that it's well, it's a very complex and very interesting issue. As you suggested, maybe if we consider the details of narrow notation, I think that Lamb himself suggests that when considering narrow notation, the difference between R and OR nodes seems to be quite irrelevant because we don't have different types of nodes for ANDs and for ORs. We only have numbers and that are assigned to the thresholds that can be activated. But I think if I can suggest some kind of interpretation here, precisely considering the slide that I was going to present later, that the order OR node is still relevant. For example, here we have an example that well, this is precisely an example of the ordered downward order OR. Okay.
Yeah, I should have waited 2 more minutes.
No, it's okay, but it means that the presentation was relatively coherent, or that or that it had something to do with the issue that is being discussed here. Okay, but I think that it's relevant that the order or is relevant. It's complex here because the order is not a matter of sequencing, like in the case of ants. But here we have an example. I think it's a nice example of the way how the order or node works. Here we have the lexical node for water. Okay, water is written in single letters, and the water written in capital letters makes reference to the node corresponding to the semantic node. Okay, we don't have any node there, but the label that says water establishes that we have a node here. Maybe we could draw a circle or something else. Water, as you see, is connected. The lexical node for water is connected directly to the meaning water, and this is default option. This is the option by default. If there is no additional information, we are going to say water. But we have another expression that it's H2O. H2O is the chemical representation of water. If chemical scientific information is activated, for example, the composition of a water molecule, the water molecule is integrated by both two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom. If this information is activated, it is information that has presence. But if information that has presence is not activated, we go by the default option. And I think that is very interesting because it can explain the fact that synonym works in this way in the linguistic system. Because, for example, in cat and kitty in English, cat and kitty are synonyms, but kitty is a case that is not the default option. The default option is cat, I think. Kitty will be used in maybe in quite informal context. I don't know. Maybe if you are talking about a little cat, about cartoons, and we may propose many examples like that. Let's consider a complex one. For example, in English, two synonyms. Maybe you can help me with that. An expression that is the common one, another that is for example, loneliness and solitude. That's here you have one. I think that in English, loneliness is the default option, and solitude is the present option. Maybe you are activating other meanings.
Okay, so if I may, I totally get what you're saying, and that makes total sense. But then, if we want to be realistic and really understand what happens there, we would want to ask what by default realization means in like neurocognitive reality.
Okay. Well, that it's very difficult. Okay, here we are considering that's a very good question.
Because I think by talking about by default
here we are at the linguistic at the level of linguistic description, and maybe this description is adequate considering language use. Maybe we are in the first or the second base of linguistic reality according to Lamb's theory. We have not jumped yet to the third or the fourth basis.
Well, my intuition actually is that this ordered OR node is a sort of trap created by the very abstract notation system. And my opinion is that what we call by default line is actually a line so strong because it receives additional activation from several parts of the system, of the cognitive system, and it has been receiving this activation from very early, so that we perceive it as a default line, but it actually also a matter of more and stronger additional activation. But and if we see it like that, it's not really a default line. It's just the way the activation usually goes because this connection is so strong.
Yeah.
But the node would still send activation to both lines at any time. Only that the other one is so weak that in most of the cases will not get activated.
I think I agree. I
So,
think that's
okay,
that's a very good
if
explanation of the.
If that is the case, then even in abstract notation, that node is not ordered in any way.
I think
So,
you have a good point. Yeah, I say I think I see what you suggest, but maybe the fact that we have a default option because the connection between the meaning and the default option is very strongly established. I think I used this type of notation when I wanted to show that the project in Spanish of the so-called inclusive language was quite weird because we as native Spanish speakers use the masculine as the default option. If I say los médicos, the doctors, I mean both men, women, people who don't identify themselves either as men or women, without a gender, but a native Spanish speaker will use the masculine morpheme by default as inclusive. And as you say, maybe there is a strong connection between the meaning inclusive and the default option that is O in the case of Spanish. But I think that maybe it can also be a trap of abstract notation. In fact, abstract or compact notation is quite general, and in fact, I think that Lambs himself suggests this abstract or compact notation does not aim at presenting any kind of neurological plausibility. On the other hand, we can demand neurological plausibility if we consider narrow notation.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so, thank you.
I should have said that maybe this presentation is relatively humble or relatively short in the sense that maybe will not provide much information about neurological plausibility. But if we consider linguistic evidence, we still have we still are able to interpret or to infer that the linguistic system is a system of relationships, of course.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, if we are working with relational networks and neurocognitive linguistics, of course, we don't have to resign. We don't have to lose the perspective that neurological plausibility is by the end of the way. Is in the horizon. No. Well, I don't know if I have considered enough. If I have answered something about your question.
Yes, totally. Thank you.
Okay. I think that we have talked a lot and that the 70 slides, 70 pages of the presentation was too long. And only the fact of talking, only the objective of talking about the very nature of relational networks is difficult enough. So maybe we can consider some more examples, and maybe I can finish with this with this presentation, and maybe you can make some questions or present some objections and complaints. Okay.
Well, if
so
maybe you can share some of your latest examples
I will do
anomalous
that.
cases. Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, some anomalous cases. Okay.
Yeah.
One of the main objectives of this presentation was to precisely consider anomalous cases. Well, we have a lot of information here. Okay. This relational network, we could, for example, consider that. Here we have in blue, by the middle of the figure, the lexical node corresponding for gato, the Spanish word corresponding for cat. You see, gato is connected to thief and to other and to the concept that is represented by a semicircle there, which has an n inside. This n means that some certain number of concepts have to be activated in order to activate this threshold node. And something interesting here may be the fact that we have some meanings that correspond to other cognitive systems. For example, the somatosensory system, the visual system, the auditive system, that are connected with the concept that in its turn is connected to linguistic information. But we may consider some anomalous cases. For example, this one. I think this is relatively funny. Some time ago, President Bush of the USA said precisely this. You can go to this link and confirm that he in fact said that. Our enemies are innovative and resourceful, and so we are. They never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and neither do we. Okay, this example is not only funny, but also relevant, because readers may infer that there is some unintentional meaning that President Bush in fact transmitted as intentional, independently from or against his own intention. And this information can be represented in terms of relational networks. Well, here we have a narrow notation, but in terms of narrow notation, we can show that the meaning corresponding for harm received more activation than the meaning corresponding to protect, which here intentionally is represented in gray. Gray lines represent nodes and connections that are actually represented in the neurocognitive system of President Bush, but were not strongly enough activated. So the meaning corresponding for harm was more strongly activated than the meaning corresponding to protect, and that's the connection with the meaning of and it is the meaning corresponding for harm is connected to the concept or meaning corresponding for people of the USA, and that's why Bush said harm instead of protect, for example. Can we be completely sure of that interpretation? Of course not. We are only suggesting that many people interpreted that Bush thought about harm instead of protecting. The relational networks and no scientific theory, no linguistic theory can be completely sure about the intentions and the meanings and the thoughts and assumptions that are held or that a certain person have in mind. But relational network theory can account for the fact of the interpretation that many people, that many interpreters developed when they heard that President Bush said harm instead of protect. Here have another interesting example in Italian by Pope Francis, who is the Argentinian Pope. He said he used the expression cazzo instead of caso. Se ognuno di noi non accumuli ricchezze soltanto per sé, ma la mette al servizio degli altri, in questo caso, he corrected, la provvidenza di Dio si rende visibile in quanto gesto di solidarietà, which means if each of us does not accumulate wealth only for himself, but puts such wealth at the service of others, in this, the word cazzo is a strong word that means sheep or cock, or instead of case, the providence of God becomes visible as a gesture of solidarity. The fact that he used cazzo instead of caso can be interpreted in terms of the strong position of the Pope against capitalism, for example. His vision of Christianity has to do with the idea that capitalism is wrong, that modern democracy is maybe not the best system we may have, and he aims at suggesting that people should come back to some original values of Christianity and so on. Well, this interpretation allows us to suggest that the meanings that were strongly activated in the semological system of Pope Francis when he said cazzo instead of caso are the meanings corresponding to bath, wealth, maybe the other one that you have represented there. I mean, a lot of some meanings that are associated with wealth, like something that is bad. That due to that, he said cazzo instead of caso. At the precise moment in which he said cazzo instead of caso, the meanings corresponding to bad, wealth, things that are wrong, were activated. And this is very interesting because relational networks are relational network theory is a theory that, precisely as Lamb suggested, can deal with anomalous cases that are not considered by other linguistic theories. We should say not only that are not considered by other linguistic theories, but cases that cannot be explained by other linguistic theories. And here we have that by means of relational networks, we can account for the fact that, for example, when we have another example that corresponds to the Prime Minister of Britain, David Cameron, but in the case, for example, of Pope Francis, when he said cazzo, the intended meaning was to communicate an example by means of the expression in questo caso, in this case. But finally, he communicated that he considers that wealth is bad. Did he communicate that intentionally? No, he did not communicate that intentionally. This is information that Pope Francis transmitted, but it's not complete. It's not. It's complicated. It's complex, of course, but it is possible for relational network theory to explain for that fact by means of a relational network like the one we have here. And of course, we have many other cases,
If I may interrupt, Jose, actually, to add up to these examples, I'm referring to the Pope Francis example. Another thing that, in my opinion, is beautiful about this theory is the following. Sometimes this kind of unintentional puns or slips of tongue may be influenced also by the phonological context. So you can pronounce, it's like a matter of assimilation almost of sounds. And it might be the case here that that fricative C sound being surrounded by plosives or affricates, which are anyway more punctual than the longer sounds like a fricative, might be slightly influenced also by that phonological context. And of course, maybe that influence is not enough by itself to turn a ts into a t, but what I was trying to say is that this can add up with the other influence coming from the semantical part of the network. So there might be actually different kind of influences. The one that you explained, having to do with the concept of bad, connected to the wealthy people, but then reinforced, let's say, at the phonological level
Yeah, sure.
by the phonological context. And being all these things parts of the same interconnected network uh, is like it is an illustration of the, in my view, of the explanatory strength of this kind of model, I think.
Of course, sure. I don't have here any example that shows the influence of the phonological level, but that what you say is absolutely true. And maybe you could say, okay, but we cannot be sure that Pope Francis was thinking about that, and that he thinks that wealth is bad and that poor is good. And this is just your interpretation. Okay, if it's only the interpretation of some person, relational networks accounts for the fact that some people uh, interpret that the sleep of Pope Francis has the meaning that it has. Sometimes it represents the system of the speaker, sometimes it represents the system of the hearer. The issue here is that relational networks account for the interconnectivity between the different linguistic levels, of course, and that anomalous, weird, rare cases are not a mystery for the theory. On the contrary, they show how the linguistic system, they contribute to show that the linguistic system is precisely a system of relationships.
I have a very good example, if you
Okay.
allow
Okay.
me, and maybe
Of course.
I will I will I will allow you to analyze it and even write
Okay.
a
I have
paper
some
on it if
examples
you
in
want.
Spanish.
No, I have an example in English because
Okay.
like almost 20 years ago, when I was very young, I lived for 2 years in the US, and I taught Spanish there. And in one of the first classes I had, I was very nervous about my English. I wasn't sure about how I expressed myself in English. So I was talking to the class. They were like juniors, high school juniors, I think. And what I wanted to say was, please take out a piece of paper. Now, as I was approaching the moment I had to say that, I started getting worried about how I would pronounce piece of paper, because I
Ah,
feared I would say it like piss, like you piss,
yeah.
that the E would be too short and that the
Yeah.
class would start to laugh or something like that. So as I was approaching, I thought about not saying piece of paper, but sheet of paper.
I see. Yeah. Okay.
So, and I was almost there at the moment I was about to say that, and in my mind, all these concepts were lighting up. Should I say piece of paper? No, they will hear it as piece. Should I say better sheet of paper? So everything mixed. And the moment I had to say it out loud, I just said it. Now go ahead and take out a sheet of paper. So
Okay.
everybody started laughing because I said shit, a sheet of
I
paper.
see.
So it was not sheet, it was not piece, but a sheet of paper.
Shit.
Yeah. So that is probably very easily explained in these relational
Yeah.
terms, and which is also an example of both kind of influences. I think
Well,
concept like piece, sheet, and paper and stuff like that but then also the influence of phonological or the conceptualizing of the phonological long and short E's and stuff like that.
And it's also very interesting because it also shows that meanings, phonology are working all together when you are in linguistic planning. It's the process is not as simple as we could think, that first meaning, then lexicogrammar, then phonology, they are all activated together. And there is in special issue that will be published soon by you, in which you are the editor. There is a work about that has something to do with what you mentioned by Uruguayan linguist who studied how native Spanish speakers sometimes mix English phonemes in their production. But here, well, we could make a representation. We could try to draw a relational network of your very funny case of you were trying to inhibit the meaning for shit, you were trying to inhibit the meaning for peace, and finally phonology activated the meaning that you didn't want to activate.
I have also an interesting example in Spanish. In the context of political elections in Argentina, I have heard a journalist to say voto favoritario instead of voto mayoritario. Favoritario instead of voto mayoritario. Given there are two contexts involved here, the cognitive semantic context and the morphological context that interact each other, no? I think it's very interesting. Coming to play a blending phenomenon. You have the vote of the majority of people and the existence of favorite candidates. So there is a blending, and the two lexicogrammatical networks in each case, in one case, and in the other case, morphological lexicogrammatical networks operate. I think it's very.
This kind of blending that you're mentioning, you can see them very well in the language context phenomena, which I have recently started to try to interpret in relational terms, because there you always have like at least two kind of information competing for successful activation, and what you get most of the times are hybrid forms.
Yes, that's right.
Here you have sometimes this we have intentional cases. This is an example provided by the philosopher Grice when he aims at accounting for the exploitation of conversational maxims. He mentions a British general who said, "I have sinned" when he conquered the Indian province of Sindh. He was intentionally ambiguous. "I have sinned." Sindh activates both the province of India and the participle of the verb sin. This is intentional ambiguity, and it's based on phonology. Sindh, sense activate the sequence, the phonological sequence. Sindh, sense activation both to the node for Sindh, to the node for the participle of the verb sin, and then in its turn, the node for the lexical node for sin activates the province of India, and the participle of sin activates the meaning of the verb sin.
Yeah.
Relational networks are wonderful. Okay, that's the conclusion here. Let's say thank you to CELINE.
Yeah. Well,
thank you,
Daniela Oranca, that you have been exposed to maybe a new way of seeing things. Do you have any questions?
No. The conference was really good. a good way to show us that we have a kind of syntax of the semantics, and I think I could understand a few of Lam's systems. So thank you very much, José María.
No, thank you. Gracias a vos.
And my conclusion is that the way you present things can be very, let's say, very easy to understand for someone who has never heard about these things. So maybe I will arrange sometime in the future a meeting between you and some of my students.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whenever you want, of
We'll
course.
talk about that, yes. Especially for the second semester, I will
Okay.
teach an optional
I
class
would love
on,
to do that, and I would love to do that. Yeah.
on this
Maybe
topic,
sometime I can try. I can go to Romania, or you can visit us sometime. I think that in the future we are
We
going to do that.
definitely need to arrange that as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
That would be wonderful.
Okay, great. So if there are no other questions, then thanks a lot, José María. Yeah, JP, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in a bit. Let's see, which one will I pick here? I wrote down a bunch of questions, actually.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
I go back to the labels being like highway signs, not part of the road itself. I'm not sure you want to use that one, because signs, while not part of the roadway itself, are necessarily essential to its function, whereas labels have nothing to, don't really do anything in the neural pathways. They're just convenient and help us read the diagrams more easily.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point.
Maybe another better way. Signs are essential to the highway's function.
Yeah, I think what we could maybe Jose thought about that is more similar to the writings on a map, maybe.
That's right. Yeah.
Not on the highway.
The signs beside the highway is the example provided by Lamb himself. But yeah, of course that for us drivers, signs are fundamental, because we have to know if I go to Washington or if I go to New York, for example, and I need to read the sign and I need to read the letters that are written there, of course. But in fact, the road will be built. The road is there independently from the signs. I think that's the metaphor here. That's the reason of the comparison that is presented here. But yes, you're right. Maybe in some sense, to some extent, the labels that are written besides the nodes in relational networks are also necessary to understand the relational network that we are representing, for example. But it's a good issue. It's a good issue.
Yeah, do what you want with it. And now I'd like to add, I could come up with a handy excuse for joining this talk on Christmas Day. Handy excuse, and it's a good one. Whether you believe in, Jesus being God or anything like that, just to lay out the concepts, whether you agree with them or not. Jesus is also known as the Word. And when I was trying to find out more about the word, or as it was in Greek, the logos, it started to seem compatible and maybe even identical with the idea of the linguistic information system, i.e., posit Jesus as the linguistic information system of God. I mean, he's supposed to be the mouthpiece. I mean, like, he's supposed to be translating God's meanings into human phonons. Therefore, it seems to me that a talk on this topic is not only permissible, but recommended for Christmas Day. There's my excuse. Lame or not, I'm in.
It's a good one.
All right. I'd like to remark how I was first impressed by what was then called stratificational grammar. Now, let me see if I can get to where I can verify that you're seeing something.
Great.
These diagrams, see how they have more curves and stuff? I mean, these diagrams were just so beautiful to me. And at the time, what did I have to compare them with? I had Chomsky's transformational grammar. See, here's another one.
Hmm.
And these, I mean, it just looks more neural, besides being beautiful and got lots of sexy curves. You love, you know, you love her.
Yeah, great.
And that's actually one of the fantastic thing about the theory, I think, and Lam explained several times that it got to this, let's say, level of plausibility before he even thought about any neurological relevance.
Yeah.
So based only on like linguistic data, and I mean the stratificational grammar, if I'm not wrong, did not intend in any way of making any bridge with neuroscience. It was just a way of doing linguistics based on linguistic data.
That's right.
Well, transformational grammar seemed more like it represented what's going in the mind than the grammar I was familiar with from, you know, prescriptive stuff and, you know, Reed Kellogg.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
That seemed more plausible as a way that language works in the mind. It's the stratificational grammar, whether it meant to or not, took me a step further. I'm looking, this really looks like how it works.
Exactly. Yeah, thanks for that insight. Great. So, hoping that next events will be planned on more regular days than Thanksgiving, I hope to hear more about this. I mean, Gisela here will also present something in the near future, and we will find different contexts to keep on sharing these ideas on neurocognitive linguistics and relation network theory. So thanks again for this intimate talk event, and I hope to see you all in the future. And JP, happy Thanksgiving to you all.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you for
Happy Thanksgiving. Have a wonderful day.
All right, thanks a lot. Hasta luego.
Bye bye.
Hasta luego,
Bye.
nos vemos.
Chao.
Ay, hasta pronto.
Bye.
Chao, José, chao.